Good morning. This meeting will come to order. It is a public meeting of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to consider final rules under the Dodd-Frank Act. I'd like to welcome members of the public and market participants and members of the media, as well as those listening on the phone and watching the webcast. I'd like to thank Commissioners Summers, Chilton, O'Malia, and Weegin for their significant contributions to the rule writing process, and I also want to thank the hardworking and dedicated staff at the CFTC. Today is our 25th open meeting to consider Dodd-Frank rulemakings, when we will consider one final rule today on 4 topics, all related to clearing: customer clearing documentation, the timing of acceptance for clearing, or what many people call so-called straight-through processing, allocation by asset managers of bunched orders, and provisions related to clearing member risk management. Today's rule is a result of significant public input on these 4 different proposals, and we've benefited greatly from that public input. In 2008, the swaps market helped build up risk in the financial system that spilled over into the real economy, affecting businesses and consumers across America. An important goal of the Dodd-Frank Act is to prevent such risk in the financial sector from, again, infecting the real economy, which I have noted in the past provides 94% of private sector jobs. Today, we'll consider a rule that helps broaden market access and promotes competition in the swaps market. The rule will also help lower risk in these markets. And though it is quite technical, and some might say it's sort of into the plumbing of the derivatives marketplace, these rules today are critical to promote access, lower risk, and ultimately help in transparency of the market for commercial end users in the real economy. Our country will benefit from financial reform, and in fact, in addition, the financial side of the economy will also benefit from greater transparency and competition in the derivatives markets. And importantly, investors, retirees, homeowners, and customers of pension funds, mutual funds, and community banks all will benefit from lower cost and greater pricing information of a more open and transparent market. And I believe today's rule, beyond helping out clearing and protecting the clearinghouses, will promote more open access and broader access to these transparent markets. One of the primary goals of Dodd-Frank is to lower risk to the public by increasing the use of central clearing to promote the financial integrity of the markets and the whole clearing system. Today's rule is an important step toward achieving these goals. It promotes broad access to central clearing, increases transparency, and supports efficiency, and of course bolsters risk management. Specifically, the rule establishes requirements for the documentation between a futures commission merchant and its customers and between a swap dealer and its counterparties. It sets standards for the timely processing of trades that minimize the time between submission and exception or rejection of trades for clearing. It requires bunched orders for swaps executed as a block to be immediately accepted into clearing and then allocated into individual accounts later in the day. This is similar to rules that have been on the books for years in the futures markets. And it strengthens risk management procedures of clearing members to enhance market integrity. We're working to finish Dodd-Frank rules and reforms in a thoughtful, balanced way, and in a way that carefully considers the costs and benefits of each rule, not against a clock, but to protect the American public and promote transparency. As such, we're continuing to work with the Securities and Exchange Commission on the entity definitions rule, a critical reform for the regulation of dealers, and we hope to take this rule up sometime soon. There's much other work to be done on products definition and other roles, which we'll be working on through this spring. We've completed 28 final rules to date, and potentially one more after today. And though we've made great progress on these congressionally mandated reforms that bring transparency and competition in the markets, there's much yet to do. I have confidence in the Commission and the CFTC staff that we'll finish the remaining reforms this year for the benefit of investors, retirees, consumers, and businesses in America. Before we hear from staff, I'd like to turn it over to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank the rulemaking team for all of their hard work and diligence in packaging these rules together today. I think all the work we've done on this has been really important and a learning experience for sure for me. Today, we are considering rules that address the documentation between a customer and a futures commission merchant that clears on behalf of a customer, the timing of acceptance or rejection of trades for clearing by derivatives clearing organizations and clearing members, and the risk management procedures of futures commission merchants, swap dealers, and major swap participants that are clearing members. The aim of these rules is to provide increased access to clearing and competitive execution of transactions, mitigation of counterparty credit risk through central clearing, prompt, efficient, and accurate clearing using straight-through processing, minimization of the time between trade execution and acceptance into clearing, certainty around post-trade allocation of bunched orders, and greater integrity to the markets in the clearing system by setting out basic risk management requirements for participants in the clearing process. The goals that these final rules seek to achieve are the right ones for our market, and for that reason, I support them. However, I am troubled that in finalizing the rules, we continue to require substantial modifications to common business practices without recognizing the time and costs it will take to comply. Any rules we issue must be rules that are technologically and operationally feasible for market participants. The last thing we want to do at this critical juncture is to create barriers to entry. We must be mindful that while we create additional opportunities for clearing, we do not undermine the integrity of our clearing members or our clearing houses. There are some entities that already have the required technology to comply with these rules, but other entities may have to build out the appropriate system changes. Collectively, these changes are not insignificant and may require these entities to come to the Commission to request more time. To the extent market participants require additional time or other relief to comply with the technological requirements of that these rules may create, we have delegated to the Director of DCR the ability to consider granting such relief when warranted. We took a similar approach in granting this type of relief with our Part 20 large swap trader reporting rules, which we knew market participants may be unable to comply with. In that instance, the Division of Market Oversight has issued multiple no-action letters that apply market-wide to assure market participants that the Division will not recommend enforcement action be taken against a market participant for providing non-compliant reports to the Commission. In that context, we have recognized that when market participants are acting in good faith and are working toward compliance with the new rules, relief is appropriate. If we again issue rules that market participants cannot comply with, I believe we must provide the appropriate relief. One of the goals of Dodd-Frank was to mitigate systemic risk. I believe that in finalizing some of these rules, perversely, we may actually be concentrating risk in only the largest firms that have the ability to comply with all of the rules that we continue to layer on, thereby actually reducing competition. Businesses whose dealing operations are small may decide that it is just too costly to comply with all of these rules. And I don't think that is the outcome that any of us desire as we continue to implement this new regulatory framework. Again, thank you to the team for all their work, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Summers. If I might just say that the part about relief, I share your views on that. I'm glad the Division of Market Oversight has done what they've done. I'm glad we've allowed similar authorities delegated in this proposed rule. I think it came with your help and why it's in there. Commissioner Chilton.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes regulators have to nudge the market or market participants, and sometimes we have to raise the bar a little bit. I think we're raising the bar today with the straight-through processing, and I echo a lot of what Commissioner Summers said. Often when I hear Commissioner Summers talk, I say, well, she's so smart, she's so right on these things, how can we disagree with the outcome? But today I'm glad that most of what you said I not only agree with, but I think we're coming out the same place on. So that's a pleasure. The last thing is about the costs, because we've talked a lot about this in here and in our individual speeches and stuff. And I just want to make the point, as I've made recently, that this is part of the process, that this rule isn't the be-all, end-all, that the cost-benefit isn't the be-all, end-all. It's an important part. But all these things are part of this big mosaic of Dodd-Frank. And when we think about the cost to companies, which we absolutely need to do, and we need to think about how it's going to impact businesses and markets, and we don't want to lessen competition. But when we think about that, we also have to think about this in light of this huge economic crisis and the cost of not having regulations. What did a decade of deregulation do? And I've said a bunch of times about how the regulated futures market operated very well. No company went down in the crisis because of their regulated futures positions. But the OTC market, that's the big kahuna that we're getting, this hundreds of trillions of dollars. And if we don't get this mosaic right, as I've talked about before, the balancing act, we're not going to protect consumers. So we need to get these things in place. I appreciate the speed, but also the deliberateness of which the chairman's brought forward the rules. And I know it's been tough for a lot of us to try and keep up with them at times. But to be honest, I think we need to double our efforts, because the American people they're relying on us. If we do this right, look, if we're getting a rule wrong, then we need to slow it down. But we've showed we can do that. We're almost a year behind. We've showed that we can slow down. I think we need to look at, Mr. Chairman, some of these rules that are coming up, and I'd like to see us do, several, 2, 3, when we get these meetings a couple of times a month, just so we can get these things in place. I think it'll be good for markets, it'll be good for consumers, and I think ultimately it'll be good for the economic engine of our democracy. So I thank all the staff, and I thank my colleagues for their work on this good rule.
Thank you, Commissioner Chilton. Commissioner Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Today, the Commission will consider one final rulemaking combining 4 groups of rules that the Commission has proposed in separate rulemakings relating to customer clearing, the timing of acceptance for clearing, and the allocation of bunch orders after clearing, and clearing member risk management. I thank John Lawton and his team very much for their hard work and their tenacity in reviewing dozens of comment letters and addressing some of my concerns in this final rulemaking. Unlike certain of our other rulemakings, each of the group of rules attempts to be non-prescriptive and aims to establish an efficient yet flexible framework. In general, I support the principles underlying the prohibition against certain provisions in customer clearing, documentation, and the establishment of rules for the post-allocation of bunched orders and the development of straight-through processing to reduce latency periods between execution and clearing. As I've said before, clearing is a complicated process, but I believe the market-driven technology solution can and will provide the swaps market. The swaps execution operates as smoothly as it does in the futures market, so I do support that effort to get rid of the documentation. Today's final rulemaking appropriately combines the customer clearing documentation rules with a group of rules regarding the timing of acceptance for clearing, also known as straight-through processing. I've always favored facilitating prompt execution and clearing of swaps as quickly as the current technology will provide. One thing that is apparent from this rulemaking is that technology is essential to ensuring the success of clearing and the reduction of counterparty risk in the swaps market. For example, it is my understanding that the industry has decided not to embrace the negotiation of trilateral agreements and instead begin focus on developing technology for pre-trade credit screening. To implement such technology, the industry must undertake a significant build-out and onboarding. These technology solutions are rapidly developing, but are months away from full industry adoption. I'm encouraged that the industry, both the buy side and the sell side, are working on principles for a technology solution. During our next Technology Advisory Committee meeting on March 29th, we will discuss these issues in greater detail and will identify potential impediments and market-based solutions as well. The Commission has heard from a myriad of market participants, of whom have expressed concerns regarding the use of trilateral agreements. I concur that trilateral agreements could result in anti-competitive behavior. I'm also convinced technology, not elaborate documentation, will improve access to onboarding, trading, and clearing. Additionally, the final rule making includes rules that require the clearing members maintain adequate standards of risk management. Essentially, these rules provide the Commission with the ability to go after clearing members who fail to maintain these standards. These rules call into question whether the Commission continues to view the designated self-regulatory organizations, the DSRO model, as a viable one going forward. I've said in the past that DSROs are the frontline supervisors of all intermediaries, such as clearing members. In light of the MF Global collapse, however, several questions arise regarding whether the Commission should do more to review DSROs' supervision practices, but this rule would not have changed anything related to MF Global. Under the Commission's final core principles rulemaking, DCOs, or derivative clearing organizations, are required to self-certify their rules with the Commission. Under core principle D, a DCO must ensure that it possesses the ability to manage risks associated with discharging responsibilities, including the establishment of credit risk limits on clearing members. With today's clearing member risk management rules, the Commission is taking the position that DSRO model is not enough and that to some extent direct regulation is necessary. I disagree with this redundant regulatory approach. Further, since the Commission is committed to developing MF Global related reforms for both DSROs and future Commission merchants, the Commission should have waited to finalize this group of rules to avoid regulating in an ad hoc manner. As I stated previously, the Commission continues to play hide the ball by not providing sufficient details regarding the implementation timeline. This rule is no different and highlights the fact that the sequencing of our rules is haphazard, and we seem to be going out of our way to make the schedule as complicated as possible. The compliance schedule fails to account for interdependencies between rules of the dealer definition, determining which swaps will be subject to mandatory clearing, and establishing guidance for the registration and regulation of CEFs. I've urged the Commission countless times to make sense of this implementation timelines. President Obama has demanded a more comprehensive analysis from our regulatory agencies than what is presented in the Commission's rules here today. While the cost-benefit analysis is better than in some recent rules and includes an appropriate baseline that is not tied to an arbitrary assumption, it is flawed in two major areas. One, the lack of quantification, and two, the failure to conduct any research or sophisticated analysis. To prove my point regarding quantification, this rule's cost-benefit analysis does not contain one single number or even a dollar sign. How can a rule setting standards for clearing fail to offer one estimate when market participants have been clearing swaps for over a decade? I find it hard to imagine the Commission could not survey market participants to discern the range of possible outcomes. I continue to believe that our cost-benefit analysis are a crucial part of each and every rulemaking, and we can't continue to disregard our statutorily mandated responsibilities to, one, set appropriate baselines, two, to conduct research or utilize sophisticated survey techniques, and three, based on the research of those surveys, provide a quantification of potential costs. Unfortunately, I am unable to support the final rules for three specific reasons. First, we failed to develop a clear schedule that integrates other rules. Second, the rule undermines the self-regulatory approach of DCOs to manage FCM risk management and calls into question the entire DSRO oversight regime by substituting Commission judgment for the judgment of DSROs. This new approach is a solution in search of a problem. Finally, I believe the cost-benefit analysis suffers from a lack of quantitative analysis. I know the Commission is capable of much more, and the question remains, however, if we are able to slow down our rulemaking to do the actual work. My dissent on this rule should not take away from my deep appreciation I have for the hard work of the staff or my desire to implement an effective straight-through processing regime that eliminates the needs for unnecessary and limiting documentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Amalia. Commissioner Weegan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I attended for the first time the FIA's annual conference, and there participated in a panel on clearing and trade execution. I found the panel and the conference as a whole extremely valuable. I heard many viewpoints about market developments and the Commission's rules, which added color to the picture already presented to us in formal comments submitted to the Commission. Like the meetings I have had with interested parties since my arrival at the Commission, the conference reflected the fact that the markets and entities this Commission regulates are experiencing enormous change. The Commission itself is undergoing significant change as its mission has evolved and responsibilities have increased. I sensed last week that all of us who care about these markets are finding the changes to be a bit unsettling, exciting, or both. These observations also apply to the rule before us today. There is hesitation from some market participants that the rule would not permit adequate and necessary risk management for dealers and clearing FCMs, and that time is needed to invest in necessary technology upgrades. Others argue that the technology already exists and little time is needed to adopt it, and they are eager to deploy it in order to seize opportunities that will come with mandatory clearing. Again, in my conversations, I've heard both sides of the debate, but the latter argument was much closer to a consensus view. For example, from my discussions on the panel, the overwhelming consensus appeared to be that risk management concerns relating to trade breakage are not pressing ones. I recognize that not every viewpoint was presented on the panel. Indeed, we've heard other viewpoints in the comment letters. But in practice, neither counterparty to a trade has an interest in a trade breaking, which was true before today's rule was proposed and will remain so. In fact, the energy swap markets transitioned to a post-trade clearing solution after experiencing disruptions from the fall of Enron. They continue to serve as the best evidence that real-time trade acceptance is possible with minimal breakage. This also suggests that risk is being adequately managed through that mechanism, and thus counterparty credit concerns should not necessarily limit access to liquidity. Additionally, in my discussions last week and in comment letters, FCMs, sell-side liquidity providers, and buy-side firms noted that certain provisions in trilateral agreements ostensibly designed to help manage customer credit risks may be unnecessary and counterproductive to the push for clearing. Moreover, as noted, existing clearing arrangements in the energy space demonstrate that markets can operate without the provisions prohibited by today's rule. There also were firms at the conference that exhibited their technology for clearing services that explain how their products are available today and could be deployed rapidly for use. I understand their interest in saying so, but the evidence they displayed was compelling. For these and other reasons, I will be supporting the staff's recommendations on customer clearing documentation, the timing of acceptance or rejection of trades, and risk management procedures. They are intended to ensure that all market participants will have open access to clearing and competitive execution, and that clearing members will have strong risk management systems in place to prevent disruptions to the markets and the clearing system. I am persuaded they will help the marketplace achieve these goals. The rule will not interfere with, but rather expedite the arrival of a competitive landscape for clearing FCMs, DCOs, and dealers who will compete on at least two fronts: transparency in how they manage risk, and their technology to enable best execution. This market dynamic will, I believe, lead to the continued development of technology solutions with the support of a reasonable regulatory deadline. Risk management is one of the keystones of the market for cleared swaps, but it must not be done in a way that impairs open access or competitive execution. Counterparty risk can be mitigated by reducing as much as possible the delay between execution and acceptance. The rule we are considering today will require CEFs and DCMs to be able to effect straight-through processing. It also will require clearing FCMs to coordinate with DCOs to ensure that trades are accepted for clearing as quickly as technologically practicable. And for swaps subject to mandatory clearing, dealers will be required to submit the swaps to the DCO as soon as technologically practicable after execution. The rule also specifies risk management standards for clearing members and requires periodic stress tests of positions held at DCOs. I believe these recommendations will provide an appropriate nudge to the market to embrace the change to clearing even more quickly than it has. As always, however, the Commission must ensure that these timelines realistically account for the operational challenges that will confront market participants. Aggressive timelines that are not realistic could dampen competition between firms and ultimately hurt the consumers we are aiming to protect. I just want to make note of Commissioner Summers' comments and mention that I agree with the point that she made. You could have this perverse effect with, if you have an overly aggressive timeline, that you could have this perverse effect of dampening competition between FCMs, which is not a desired outcome. This is consistent with my previous statements that the Commission must take a measured approach to our regulations. And in this case, this means we must encourage an orderly transition from the markets as they exist today to a multilateral trading and central clearing model. I believe that the rule before us will do that. I also want to thank the staff for their efforts on this rule and the hard work in their preparation of this rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Weechen. And with that, the staff will make a presentation concerning the recommendations, and afterwards we'll have some questions for you. I don't know who's going to take the lead, but Chris Howard, John Lawton, Anana Radhakrishnan, all from, and Hugh Rooney. You know, Hugh, it's the first time we've seen you here, so it's good to see you, from the Division of Clearing and Risk. And then Cam Nunnery from the Chief Economist's Office, who's done just a fabulous work on every part of this rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I turn it over to John Lawton, I would like to highlight the purpose.
Could you maybe move the mic just a little closer to you?
I would like to highlight the purpose behind these rules, which we state in the Federal Register release. One, to increase customer access to clearing. Two, to facilitate the timely processing of trades. And three, to strengthen risk management. All of these three areas, I believe, are appropriate for the Commission to issue rulemaking so that the market participants know what the expectations of the Commission are. I'm very appreciative of the efforts of the team. I think they've done a lot of hard work, and I'll turn it over to John. Thank you.
Good morning. I guess I should point out that Hugh Rooney is from our Chicago office and in particular worked on the risk management piece of this rule. Okay, the Federal Register release before you today contains 3 sets of related rules which come from 4 notices of proposed rulemaking. The first set addresses the documentation that a market participant enters into before clearing through an FCM or trading opposite a swap dealer or a major swap participant. The second set addresses the procedures to be followed when trades are submitted for clearing. The third set addresses clearing member procedures for risk management. I'll talk about each set in turn. Staff is recommending that these rules be handled as a package because they're intertwined in both their purpose and their effect. For example, if you bolster risk management at the clearing member level, trade processing can be done more quickly because orders have been screened before execution. Similarly, if trade processing is accomplished more quickly, it becomes easier for firms to expand access to a broader range of market participants because the length of time in which they're exposed to counterparty risk is shortened. So with that overview, turning first to the documentation rule, this set basically contains 3 parallel rules applying to FCMs, swap dealers and MSPs, and DCOs. The rules prohibit these regulated entities from entering into arrangements that do a number of things, including disclosing the identity of the original executing counterparty, limiting the number of counterparties with whom a client can trade, restricting the size of the positions a client can trade with any individual counterparty, impairing a client's access to execution on terms reasonably related to the best terms available, or preventing compliance with the processing timeframes, also moving forward in this rule package. Basically, the commission received 38 comments on this aspect of the proposal. 30 commenters generally supported it. 8 expressed concerns. Not everybody addressed every aspect of the proposal. Basically, the commenters in support included asset managers, market makers, trading platforms, DCOs, and some dealers. The commenters in opposition were predominantly dealers. Staff is recommending that the commission adopt the rules with one clarifying change that's responsive to the comments. As mentioned, staff believes that these rules will increase competition in both execution and in clearing, that they'll facilitate prompt processing of trades, thereby reducing risk, and that they'll decrease the opportunity for conflicts of interest both at FCMs and swap dealers. To give an illustration of these points, for example, if a market participant is limited as to how many counterparties he can trade with, or as to how large a position he can take with any individual counterparty, he seems to be less likely to get the best price. And moreover, potential counterparties would also be denied the opportunity to trade with him, potentially affecting the price they could get. This would impair overall market liquidity and price discovery. Staff notes that the types of provisions prohibited by these rules have never been in place in the cleared futures markets. And we believe that the processing and risk management rules to be discussed in a moment address many of the concerns that the prohibited provisions were originally designed to address. The clarifying amendment that we're putting in would make it explicit that nothing in these rules prohibits a dealer or MSP from placing a limit on the amount of trading that it will do with a particular counterparty. The rules only prohibit them from placing limits on the amount of trading that the counterparty can in turn do with third parties. Moving to the second set of rules, these are the processing rules. They address the handling of trades by various participants in the clearing process. Here we have 7 rules in the package, 1 for trade submission by swap dealers and MSPs, 2 for trade processing by markets. There's parallel rules for DCMs and CEFs, 2 for trade acceptance by clearing members. Again, there's parallel rules for FCMs and swap dealers, 1 for trade acceptance by DCOs, and then 1, as mentioned, for the allocation of the distribution of allocation information for bunched orders. And I'll talk about that in a moment. These processing rules generally provide for coordination among the parties to facilitate prompt processing up and down the chain. They generally set a performance standard that is related to what is technologically practicable. The goal is to achieve time frames that are as close to real time as possible. This is in the best interest of all the market participants because it promotes efficient trading and reduces risk for parties at all points in the clearing process. The commenters generally supported the thrust of these rules, but there was some disagreement as to how much can be achieved in the near term. Generally, buy-side participants in trading platforms and DCOs were perhaps more optimistic than sell-side participants about how soon straight-through processing can be achieved. Turning to bunched orders, the processing rules also contain a provision that essentially adapts the procedures that have been used for futures trades to swaps. Step back, a bunched order is a trade placed by an account manager on behalf of multiple clients, which is executed as a block and then allocated afterwards in pieces to individual client accounts. The rule, as I mentioned, the rule would apply to swaps, the procedures that have been in place in futures for a number of years. A single clearing member accepts the entire block for clearing at the time of execution, and then the account manager, after the fact, allocates the pieces out to the individual client accounts, which may be located at multiple clearing members. This procedure allows the account manager to obtain the efficiency of executing the trade as a block and the risk management protection of having a clearing member who guarantees the entire block at the time of execution and up until it can be allocated among the individual accounts. at their respective clearing members. The third set of rules that's in the package today addresses clearing member risk management. Here again, there's two rules. It's parallel rules for FCMs and for swap dealer MSPs. The two rules differ insofar as FCMs may clear on behalf of customers, while swap dealer MSPs may only clear for proprietary accounts. As the Commission knows, last October, the Commission approved extensive risk management rules for DCOs. Given the increased importance of clearing under the Dodd-Frank Act, the expected entrance into clearing of new products and of new participants, protections at the clearing member level as well as at the DCO level seem appropriate. Specifically, bringing swaps into clearing will increase both the magnitude and the nature of risks that clearing members will be facing going forward. The rules require FCMs and SDMSPs that are clearing members to do a number of things. These include establishing risk-based limits for each account, screening orders for compliance with the limits, monitoring for adherence with the limits both intraday and overnight, conducting stress tests, evaluating periodically their ability to meet margin requirements, evaluating their ability to liquidate positions if necessary, and testing lines of credit. The rules do not prescribe the particular means of fulfilling any of these obligations. As was the case in the DCO rules, clearing members will have considerable flexibility in designing risk management procedures that meet each of these requirements. For example, the rules do not specify the size of limits that must be set for any account. Similarly, the rules do not specify the terms of the stress test that will be used by any clearing member. In each case, this would be a matter of judgment that the clearing member's risk management team would make, subject, of course, to oversight by the Commission for general compliance with the rules. In response to the comments, staff recommends that the Commission modify the rules as they apply to give-ups and bunched orders. In each case, the changes would recognize that receiving clearing firms cannot pre-screen orders. So, for example, if in the case of a bunched order, the receiving firm must communicate to the executing firm what the account limit is for each particular account that's in the bunch, and then it's up to the account manager to make sure they don't allocate a position that exceeds that limit, and then therefore raises the chance of it being rejected by the clearing receiving member. This concludes my presentation. We'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, John, and at this time I'll entertain a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I support today's final rulemaking on clearing, which I think will promote market participants' access to central clearing. I think through promoting that access to central clearing, it is a critical piece also in promoting market transparency. It will foster competition as well. I think it, in essence, helps democratize the markets, which ultimately this greater competition and access to central clearing will lower costs to end users throughout the economy. I think they'll also be able to rely on bolstered risk management rules. I have a longer statement that will be entered into the record, but I just have a couple of questions on a number of areas. First is on the compliance dates. John, you may have said it, but just if you can say what the compliance date is. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure the public hears it clearly.
Yeah, the Federal Register release provides that the compliance date will be October 1. There's a further complication that with respect to those, some of the rules apply, for example, to DCMs, FCMs, or DCOs. The compliance date will be October 1 for those. For swap dealers, MSPs, and CEFs, the compliance date would be the later of that or the date in which other necessary rulemakings become effective. So
Though I have every anticipation that we will finish this entity definition rules well before October 1st, you're just saying we've put it out there that if for some reason there's not swap dealer registration by then, it's later than October 1st.
That's right, and the same for the CEF rules.
Right. And then we've also delegated, we will, if we finalize here, delegated to Ananda some discretion if futures commission merchants and swap dealers say they have a technological challenge or economic challenge to move forward. Is that correct?
Right. As there was a precedent in the internal business conduct rules, and it's essentially the same sort of language and procedure where the division director can receive requests from individual applicants for extended periods based on something not being technologically or economically practicable.
Now, I may be just speaking to the broader market participants because I know some of them had hoped that we would have this be shorter than October 1st, say, maybe July 1st or something. But so I want to clarify, nothing in this, though, limits somebody from doing all of this earlier. I mean, if a futures commission merchant wants to offer this in May or June, they're allowed to. Is that correct?
That's right. And our understanding is that there's people who are capable of doing that and have done it. And there may be competitive factors that lead people to potentially do it earlier than that date.
So for some of those out there, maybe you'd be disappointed. This is a commission process, and I think we've come out with the right result to give a little bit more time and to give some discretion to the division director because maybe not every one of the 50 or 60 clearing firms that clear today, futures commission merchants will be ready and to recognize that not all of them are the same. So I think this was a good balanced approach. For those who may have wished we'd done it earlier, I think this is the right side of things. A second area is on risk management. If I could just tease something out. And I don't want to speak for Commissioner Mallia, but I think that was the area that he had most concerns with in his statement. There are 2 points of this. There's a list of risk management procedures we're asking for futures commission merchants to do, and then as Commissioner Mallia highlighted, it's also who's asking them. Do we do it directly or do we let the self-regulatory organizations do it? Can I just focus on the first part of that? This list that we've talked about, I've taken it as, from staff, it's really a list of best practices without being too prescriptive. Is that correct?
That's right. Our understanding is that most, if not all, firms do these sorts of things today.
And if I recall, about a year ago, didn't the FIA come together and make some recommendations in this area about risk management, or was it some other industry group? So many different groups have come forward.
I believe it was FIA.
Yeah, and that helped us in making the original proposal in this area.
Right.
Yeah. I support this area. I support all 4 areas, but I just want to speak to this one for a moment because I think it's so critical. I think this is an important area, particularly as our markets have so dramatically changed from people trading on the floor in Chicago and New York and elsewhere in the futures markets to electronic trading. And when trades can be sent into a clearinghouse in nanoseconds by algorithmic traders, high-frequency traders, or just people who are trying to hedge their markets, I think it's critical that they're all have financial integrity. What does that mean? That somebody is guaranteeing that trade in the clearinghouse. And so what this rule fundamentally says is if you're going to send it in as a customer of a futures commission merchant, the futures commission merchant has to make sure that there's really you're within the limits before it's sent there. Is that correct, Ananda? I see you're about to say something. Is that right?
It is, and also the broader point is that the Commission has the responsibility to avoid systemic risk and to ensure the financial integrity of all transactions subject to the Commodity Exchange Act. Therefore, staff believes that it is entirely appropriate for the Commission to issue rules directed at registrants for risk management.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that the point has been made that this is already best practice, I do think that it is entirely appropriate for the Commission.
Yeah, no, I share that view. I support this rule. I think we have other rules for futures commission merchants. I think it's critical to have these as well because it means that other participants in the market when they enter the market. It could be a corporation trying to hedge its interest rate risk. It could be a farmer or rancher trying to hedge their risk in the corn or wheat markets, that they know that on the other side of the trade, there might be a speculator, there may be a high-frequency trader, but that high-frequency trader or algorithmic trader or speculator has to send their trade through a futures commission merchant that, in essence, has a pre-trade risk filter. So that's why I support this. Thank you. Commissioner Summers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of different questions with regard to the submission of swaps for clearing to DCOs, so that the requirements that are within the swap dealer and major swap participant requirements, and how those actually are coordinated with what a DCO already has in place. So mechanically, I have questions about how we define close of business, because the way the rule is written, it requires that swap dealers and major swap participants for swaps that are subject to the mandatory clearing requirement, they submit those swaps for clearing no later than the close of business on the day of execution, and for those swaps that are not subject to the mandatory clearing requirement, no later than the next business day after execution of the swap. So there were a couple of different comments on this, on the timing with regard to late in the day and what would be practical for submission if it's already after a DCO's cutoff time. So if we could talk about how that works and whether or not, the DCOs have a say in how these are submitted, the timing.
Okay. Yes, currently DCOs have different cutoff times, and we didn't define close of business in the rule. We've put clarifying language in the Federal Register release that makes the point that close of business for this purpose would be close of business at the DCO at which you're clearing. Our understanding is that currently people are well aware of what the cutoff time is at each DCO. They're also aware of their own processing times, and that they tend to not do trades too close to the close of business because they want to get them in and get them cleared so they don't face any increment of risk where it's not yet been accepted for clearing. So basically, I think that the question is, if someone did execute a trade at 6:59 and the close of business was 7, I think they'd probably miss the DCO's cutoff, and in fact, it would have to be submitted for clearing the next day. But again, our anecdotal understanding is that people are aware of that and try to get their trades done. And again, as I said, they're aware of their own processing speed, so they try to get their trades done quickly enough, and they're aware of how quickly an affirmation platform can react, how quickly their FCM can react, such that they can get their trades done, whatever it takes, a minute or two before the DCO cutoff time to get them in.
And my concern would be that would not be considered out of compliance with this rule, that if the DCO has a cutoff time of 7 p.m., and your execution time was actually 6:59, yet you miss the cutoff time, that by submitting it for clearing next day, we would still consider that complying with this rule.
Yeah, I think we would.
I think that's actually all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Summers. Commissioner Chilton.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk just a little bit about cost-benefit analysis. I don't know if that's one of you or if Andre needs to help out on this one, but so this document is 124 pages long. 45 pages of it are the cost-benefit analysis, so more than a third. Now, length does not equal substance always. So just because there's a third of it that's dedicated to that doesn't mean that it can't be better. And frankly, I think there are ways it could probably be better, But I'm convinced, based upon the talks with you all, that we've done everything that we are legally required to do. And when I say it could be better, it could only be better if we get help from the industry. And I'm not talking about just this rule, but there's this weird self-fulfilling prophecy that exists. So we go out and we take comments and we say, and tell us how this is going to impact your industry. And then we either get crappy information or information that we can't use or share in the public, or we get no information, and then we put a rule out and they say, you got a crappy cost-benefit analysis. And then they take us to court. I mean, we got to sort of act like a team here as an industry, and you can't have it both ways. So I actually find myself in agreement with Commissioner O'Malley with regard to we want to get the best possible cost-benefit analysis we can. But again, the cost-benefit analysis is a part of the process. That's not our goal. The goal is the reg. It includes the 45 pages, but it's not all about, it's not just the 45 pages. So I guess my only question is, have we done everything that we are required to do to, as good as we can with regard to the legal requirements of a cost-benefit analysis?
I'm happy to speak to that, and yes, I believe that we have.
Okay. So look, I hope that to the extent that we get other information on rules going forward, that we can analyze it more, get more in-depth stuff. But it's a two-way street here. We got to hear this stuff from the industry, and I'm not saying that that the industry, as a general matter, doesn't respond. Sometimes they do. They gave us some advice on this one, but I think we can all do better. And the ultimate goal, I think, is get these rule done in a thoughtful way. Thanks very much.
Will the gentleman yield?
absolutely.
I have a comment. I think that one of the points with regard to the cost-benefit analysis that is incumbent upon us to consider are the comments that we continually get and we reject based on the fact that they don't comply with the deadlines that we have set. So commenters will say, we can comply with this, but it will take an enormous upgrade for us system-wide, which reasonably may be done within 9 months to 12 months. But if you're going to require it in 60 days, we're going to have to take everybody that we have working in our IT department and put them on this project.
Right. So that's why.
Is that feasible? And is that what we should be requiring? Is that reasonable?
What we should do is provide the sort of safe harbors that I think we have in this rule, where we allow for greater time in certain instances where we hear that, or like we did in the last rule, provide sort of a, not an escape valve, but a temporary escape valve. And we've done that in this rule, where we provided the division director the authority to say, no, you can't do it. And I think those are determinations that, we can't make every determination about individual companies. But I take your point. I mean,
I don't disagree with that. But last time we did that, we did it on the dais, and today we did it last night. So I didn't even know it was there until today.
Well, the good thing is it's in the rule. I'm not saying that this process is always as neat and tidy as it should be, but the important thing is we get there. I think we agree a lot more than we disagree on the cost benefits. Sometimes I think it looks like we're maybe further apart here. Nobody disagrees. I mean, it's part of the law. It's whatever it is, the 15A of the Commodity Exchange Act. It's been there forever. So we don't agree that, we all agree it needs to be done. We want to get it done well. But some of this is uncharted territory. We didn't regulate these hundreds of trillions of dollars in swaps, so we don't know what was going on, which is why we need the input from the industry. But I don't disagree with Commissioner Summers. So thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank both of you. I mean, I think that cost-benefit considerations go to each aspect of when we consider a rule. I mean, in this particular circumstance, even on the client clearing documentation, we made changes based on comments about swap dealer risk management. Is that technically cost-benefit, or is it just prudent to give them more chance to do their risk management? It's both. I mean, I would say I'm personally influenced every time somebody comes into my office and this is what a commenter's saying. I go, well, what's the benefit? What's the cost of each of those, even when it's not quantified? And I think that each of the 5 commissioners do a lot of that. Not to mention the overall costs, which are harder to quantify, but we know it, that 8 million Americans lost their jobs and we had a financial crisis. And so Congress has said, let's move to standard products being cleared. Today's rule helps move that overall mission or that overall thing of Congress. But I'm glad this moved from a shorter implementation date to the 6 months. I'm glad we included the delegation as we did in the last one. I'm glad we're not doing it on the dais. Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you. I appreciate Commissioner Chilton's comments. We don't disagree. He wants good data from the industry. We want good rules that have good data in them. To Commissioner Summers' point, we have to be fair about what we're asking them in terms of what we can expect them to deliver and in the timeframes we're going to deliver them. They have a massive throughput of data, and they're trying to understand it, and to quantify it, we're asking them a lot. We also have that same obligation. So I'm glad to hear that we're not that far apart and that Commissioner Chilton raised this issue. It's important to me. And I said in my opening statement, this is a better rule than the last one, by far. The baseline was a little more accurate. It was accurate, I think. But we still suffer from the lack of quantitative analysis. As I said, there wasn't a single dollar figure in there. In the PRA, there actually is dollar figures. We actually surveyed the industry. That didn't make it over the line into the cost-benefit analysis, which is odd. But we can't ignore and not look because it's hard. And that's what I fear we aren't looking, because ISDA document done by NERA and working with the ISDA research staff on the cost benefits of mandatory electronic execution requirements for interest rate products. November 2011. This is broader than what we're addressing specifically here, but this is addressed in this document. Did you include this research, these quantified costs in our cost benefit analysis?
We did not reference it specifically, though I am familiar with that study.
Okay. The industry when we put out the draft rule on documentation, banning it, they moved. Dealers might not have wanted to move. They moved. They joined with the buy side, and they've been working through an organization to resolve the straight-through processing issue, to develop a technology solution, much like we have in the futures markets. They are meeting on a regular basis. In fact, they're going to be the third panel of our TAC Advisory Committee on the 29th. Did we include their solutions in this document?
I have joined one of the TAC meetings. I'm familiar with some of the work that they're doing. We did not. One of the pieces that we felt was very important in this rule was to allow the industry to develop the solutions that they felt are most appropriate. And so, to your comments earlier, providing an approach that established certain timing requirements, but not a specific solution that we would endorse as the Commission, was very important to us. And so I think the cost-benefit analysis reflects that.
Mm-hmm. Can I just one point, which is, I think it would be helpful, as one of the other commissioners said, if the commenters have these studies, if they actually attach them to their comment letters, then they would be officially in the record.
This was submitted? I think, yeah.
I don't know who submitted it and when.
Yeah, all right. I think the chairman made it, Commissioner Chilton made it, I'm sure Commissioner Weegan, he sat on that panel, he made it in his opening statement. The industry has to solve this problem. This is a technology solution. We didn't mandate which way they go, if the DCM or the DCO or the CEF or the FCM puts the credit checks in. We said it just has to get done by a specific date, as to Cam's point just a moment ago. So it's really up to the industry to do it, and I hope we've given them the time to do it. I appreciate we moved this from the draft. Why October 1?
We thought there would be sufficient time for people. I mean, this is not new, right? People know this is coming. And we thought that we give them sufficient time to, October 1, it's like 6 months from now, to come up with a solution. People have been we understand people have been working on solutions, and we thought we'd give people enough lead time to get a solution in place.
But it's not based on any conversation with the industry. It's our own estimate.
That's right.
Okay. And its relationship to mandatory clearing is, when is mandatory clearing gonna?
That I don't know. I guess staff's objective is to make a proposal to the commission very early in April. And if all goes well, hopefully we'll get the first set of determinations done 3 months after that, together with, the implementation schedule. So I'm guessing right now, middle of October. Things go well.
For mandatory, not
Yeah.
the voluntary.
For mandatory, yeah.
Okay. So we're not far,
No,
by weeks apparently,
yeah.
according to you. You just,
Yeah, and let me just understand, if I might.
please.
If we put it out, if you think we put it out in April, you're thinking the 90-day process runs to this July.
Right.
And what you referred to as October is 3 months later when it kicks in for
That's
what
right.
may be the first group. What we
That's right.
proposed was the dealer group and some of the high volume
That's right.
funds.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Would the general prohibition to disclose the identity of a customer's original executing counterparty contained in 1.72A, 23608A, 3912A, 4 Roman 5 of the Commission's regulation, in this regulation, have an effect on the request for quoting systems offered by CEFs? For example, assume that an FCM had been charged by a customer to execute a swap transaction on the customer's behalf. Would an FCM have be able to lawfully execute that transaction using an RFQ that discloses the identity of a customer's counterparty?
I don't think that would be prohibited.
Thank you. The internal business conduct rulemaking states that, quote, "The Commission generally would not view as improper making available discounted clearing services in connection with trading activities," end quote. Do regulations 1.72A and 23608A negate this statement? Why or why not?
No, I don't think that they're inconsistent. Again, the general intention of the documentation rule is disclosing the identity of third-party counterparties.
To the extent that 1.71A and 23608A would not permit an FCM to offer clearing services to a customer at a reduced rate in exchange for the customer using an affiliated SD or MSP for swaps execution, should this rulemaking clearly state that there exists a prohibition or not? Do we need to clarify that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
To the extent that 1.71A and 23608A would not permit an FCM to offer clearing services to a customer at a reduced rate in exchange for the customer using an affiliated SD or MSP for swap execution, this rulemaking should clarify that, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do not think that it prohibits that.
And therefore, it's clear enough.
Therefore, it doesn't need to,
All right.
right.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Amalia. Commissioner Weejan.
I'm starting to get used to Commissioner O'Malley stealing my thunder, since I always have to go behind him. I guess great minds think alike.
You know, over the years, somebody will come behind you and you'll get to steal their thunder too.
I was going to ask some questions about the interplay between the mandatory clearing determination by the Commission and this rule, but as I said, Commissioner O'Malley just asked some good questions about that. guess the only thing I would add is I actually think it makes some sense to have compliance with the straight-through processing requirements come before the mandatory clearing determination, which it sounds like is likely to be the outcome. Is that right?
Yes, and then the other thing we should not forget is that we don't want to discourage voluntary clearing. A lot of voluntary clearing takes place right now. The CME has some traction, ICE Clear Credits has some traction. So, we want to make sure we don't discourage that.
But this way, under the likely turning of events here, we'll have the interconnectivity between all the different participants in place before the mandatory determination comes down
Yes.
from the commission.
Yes, that's the that's the hope.
The last thing I wanted to say, it's not really related to the rule, but another observation about the conference last week. As I said earlier, I gained a great deal from that, learned a lot. I was happy to see all of my fellow commissioners there. And it was my first one, so I learned the hard way that getting through that week requires a tremendous amount of stamina. And I see a lot of people in the room who were there, and I was impressed by a lot of their stamina last week. So I hope I can follow suit as best I can next year when we all go back, so, including you, Mr. Chairman.
I did notice you left the bar a little earlier than I, but Commissioner Summers and I were still. Commissioner Chilton, I was also going to compliment John Lawton on something, but you got it.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My only comment about the FIA event is that it's a good event, and you do get a lot of industry feedback, and I did, and I appreciate it, and it's a helpful thing to hear from people. Not a lot of consumer organizations out there. Not a lot of average folks representing, American public. It's pretty much people involved in these markets. And as I say, very helpful, but that's the side you're getting. And I appreciate it. I want to continue to get it. I wanted to go back because Commissioner O'Malley, and not to beat the dead horse here, but because I think we're making progress on this cost-benefit thing. And then you mentioned, and it piqued my interest, the NERA study that you said, we did get this information, but it didn't make it across the line to be included in here. And I may be mistaken. Was that in a comment on this rule, the NERA study, or was that on the CEF rule?
We did not receive that study in response as a comment in response to this rule.
Okay, but there is one. I mean, there's a NERA study. There's documentation out there. Did you all look at it, or since it was set in on what you may not know, but it's my understanding it was set in on the CEF rule. So would we not say that would you just disregard it if it wasn't sent specifically in on this rule?
I don't know what rule it was submitted in response to, but it was not submitted in response to this rule.
Okay, well, but I want to make sure that, because if you're just saying, well, I didn't send it to the right file, then we sound like bad government. If it's a study that's a panoply, go ahead.
Here's the issue. And I may be a bit strict on this, but people need to realize that these are not neophytes in the industry.
Right.
You want to make a comment on a particular rule, comments file out there, we tell you what the date is, send it in. So if you just send it over the transom hoping that we would read it, it's difficult because, as you know, the staff is concentrating on a particular rule. There's thousands of documents floating around in the commission, and it's difficult for us to pinpoint one particular rule and say, that's something.
Are you saying that they sent it to the wrong file intentionally?
I think they sent it to the wrong file. The other issue, I think, is an APA issue, which is, the APA has a particular provision, and so if we consider a particular document that was not submitted in response to a rulemaking, are we then opening ourselves up to consider every document that's being sent to the commission?
Yeah, well, we don't probably want to go down that road with me because I've got other issues on that topic. But, so is anybody at the table familiar with this study that Commissioner O'Malley and now I have referred to?
Not me, but
I know of the study. I'm not intimately familiar with it.
What I've heard about the study is that it's fairly opaque and that it might not be relevant to this, which is maybe why they didn't send it in. But like I said, I think there's room for improvement. You've done everything that you can. The Section 15A of CEA says there's 5 things that we're supposed to consider in cost benefit. The first one, I'm not going to read all of them. The first one is protection of market participants and the public. And the 5th one, so 2 of the 5, is other public interest considerations. So how do you consider what the other public interest considerations are? I mean, the bailout was $700 billion. Is that a consideration because we didn't have regs?
Well, absolutely, it is a consideration what the systemic risk mitigation effects of the rules are. I think one thing I should point out in response to some of this is that, first of all, as we suggested, we did carefully consider all the costs and the quantified values that were submitted to us. Beyond that, I think it's also important to recognize that there was general consensus around this rule regarding the benefits. And so, Commissioner Chilton, as you are referring to, the benefits of increased speed of processing, the benefits of reduced time between execution and clearing determinations. There was broad consensus within the industry about the benefits of those superseding the costs, notwithstanding the fact that some of the costs were not quantified.
Okay.
May I add one point? And there was one commenter that tried to quantify the benefits. And as I recall, and we're trying to get the exact site, they said there was a $15 billion benefit from these rules collectively.
All right.
Did I see that General Counsel Berkovitz was trying to get the attention of the commission? It's up to you, Dan. It's whatever you want.
Just want to clarify on the nearest study. The nearest study came in, I believe it was a comment addressed on the entities definitions rulemaking.
I think it's a different study. There's a separate nearest study on entities. This is on swap execution, or on electronic execution. It's good to hear that that people are knowledgeable of this, including our chief economist, because they've read it. And to your point, Commissioner Chilton, it's not opaque. It's not any less opaque than our rule, because our rule doesn't contain a single dollar figure in it. And so it is useful. And the fact that we may be dancing on a head of a pin, whether it was submitted on this rule or the other rule, the fact is we've got to survey the industry and do, in our first analysis, what are we talking about here? How did we develop these rules? We can't ignore, at that point, the research out there. A Google search would have turned this thing up. Let's not hide behind some, regulatory construct here that gives us an excuse not to survey the industry.
Let me just say, I think that this group is doing an excellent job. I think the chief economist and the 15 people in that group and all the folks in the Division of Clearing and Risk deserve a big compliment for what they're done on this rule in considering the cost and benefits. And in considering those, we had an active public comment period where dozens of commenters came in. I know it's not a voting thing, but 5-1 they supported these things. And they pointed out the benefits, which are broad market access, benefits of lowering the barriers to promote competition, the benefits of promoting central clearing, which is at the core of what Congress asked us to do. But I do think also that we have to make sure that commenters understand if they want to get our attention to something, please tell us what rule you're sending it in on. And it would be enormously helpful if they sent in quantifications. I know that's a challenge. I know that some have done it, but only a few have done it. But I see Andrei Karolinko who wants to say something.
Yes, if I may. I think Commissioner O'Malley.
You bring the mic a little closer.
Yeah, I think Commissioner O'Malley and Commissioner Chilton and others, I think, are pointing out a very important sort of point. And us being sort of proactively engaged was discovering the costs and the benefits. I'd like to point out that on this particular rule, we did engage and find out that there currently exist technological solutions to these issues. And to the extent that the industry already has technological solutions and to some extent deployed these technological solutions, made us sort of acknowledge that the costs that the industry decided to put into these efforts in some cases have been borne. So both the technological, and we proactively engage in finding out that 3 or 4 firms already have deployed technological solutions to that extent. It is a fair point that how much more proactive can we be if we are not given what we'd ideally like to have. I think we are constrained, as others have pointed out, by what we can do under the Act and what we're required to do under the Act. And the industry collaboration, especially industry collaboration to the extent that it creates a public record, would be extremely appreciated.
Well, and to your staff, to you, Andre, I think you got the baseline right. Dealers have been clearing swaps for a decade. That's not the issue here. There are some other factors about bringing the next team on, and this whole industry effort, after the documentation rulemaking, in August? When we first did this one, last August? The tri-party, right?
Feels about right. I don't know.
Right, so they said, all right, it's clear the commission isn't going that way, and they said, we're going to put an end to it. So what's the next step? How do we get these people in place to get straight through clearing and get the credit checks done among a variety of sets? We've got the benefit in the futures market of a near vertical, straight through processing today. One clearinghouse or a clearinghouse through an exchange at CME. We've got another through ICE. That's very straightforward. The CEF universe, which the ISDA document addresses, and some of the nuance as it relates to swaps is important because you have a more horizontal structure. It's a different technology, totally achievable. I don't disagree with that one bit, but it does have a cost, and there is a time element. How fast, how much do you spend over what period of time to get this job done? That's what I'm concerned about.
We did get the benefit, and I know Commissioner Malia, and we've chatted about this, is that one trading platform, it's in our notes on page 29. When the press gets this thing on the website, you'll be able to see it. But that it was Javelin, actually put through $4.1 billion of trades. It was only 21 interest rate swaps, so it's not like it was thousands of them. But, they did put this last December, and the range took 1.3 to 1.9 seconds. I mean, they didn't do it for us. They did it because, as you said, the industry is preparing. But it was very helpful that Javelin or some other commenter sent in this record, told us about it. We were able to talk to them about it, and sort of, that's part of the record. With all respect, ISDA knows how to make something part of the record. I mean, the International Swaps and Derivative Association is big. It's an association of some of the most powerful, well-funded organizations that are thoughtful. They know how to get us something into the record. And I think this team is just doing a terrific job. I think, Dave Staywick, this is now your turn.
Commissioner Weegan.
Aye.
Commissioner Weegan, aye. Commissioner O'Malley?
No.
Commissioner O'Malley, no. Commissioner Chilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Chilton, aye. Commissioner Summers?
Aye.
Commissioner Summers, aye. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye. Mr. Chairman, on this question, the yeas are 4, the nays are 1.
I thank you, Mr. Staywick, with the A's having it and a majority supporting the rule. I want to thank the staff. I think I also need unanimous consent to allow staff to make technical changes, but I didn't see anything on the dais, so maybe there's not much to do without objection. I also was going to note John Lawton. Is it now 20 years that you have had a St. Patrick Day tradition?
32.
32 years that John Lawton has had a tradition where he invites all the staff of the CFTC and some friends to a certain watering hole near Capitol Hill. They start at breakfast time, and he said he made a record. You had 78 people this year, is that right?
Right, we had a record number of records broken.
A record number of records broken. We're not going to go there, but Commissioner Weegan, maybe next year you'll be joining the St. Patrick's Day.
No, I'm a step ahead of you, Mr. Chairman.
You were there.
I was there.
All right, all right.
I was one of the 78.
You were one of the, I think the next
I don't
year.
know if it was a record to have a commissioner there. That might have been a record in itself.
In fact, it was.
Yeah. So to speak about stamina, Commissioner Weegan, I just got to see if I can keep up with him. But my hat's off to you, Mr.
I would also know, I think what happened at the tune-in was in the public interest, and there are a lot of consumers represented there.
There are a lot of consumers.
Yeah.
And I bet you that somewhere behind the tune-in, somebody is hedging something in the grain markets that needs this rule. So thank you. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.